Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Graham, and on behalf of the workshop and the Singapore Economic Development Board, welcome to our webinar, Growing Your Business from Singapore. Today's session is designed for companies at any stage, whether you're already in Singapore, considering setting up here, or looking to use Singapore as a launchpad to go to the rest of Southeast Asia. We are joined by experts from the Singapore Economic Development Board, Hawksford, who also happen to be our very kind hosts today, globalization partners, as well as Asia market entry. Singapore is known as a competitive and well-connected hub, but what does that really mean for your growth plans? What opportunities are emerging, and what challenges should companies be ready for, whether you come to Singapore first and then go to the rest of ASEAN? More importantly, how can you leverage the EDB's workshop to grow from Singapore to the rest of the region? So over the next hour, we'll cover these topics, we'll share practical insights, and we will also take your questions. This format is intended to be interactive, so please, as soon as you have the opportunity, to you out there in the audience, on the webinar to ask questions, don't hesitate, because we will field them and we will answer them for you while we have the benefit of our expert panelists today to address these. Okay, so thank you again for being here. Let's get started with some introductions, beginning with myself. So again, I'm Graham Lim. I run a company called Automancers, which is an AI consultancy. Basically, we build other people's AI. We also leverage on talent in Southeast Asia from Singapore, and we also perform GDPR audits for software. We'll first start with an introduction from Suresh, please.
Thanks, Graham. Hello, everyone. I'm Suresh from the Singapore Economic Development Board, or EDB. We are the lead government agency for economic and industrial development strategy, planning and execution in Singapore to generate economic growth and create good quality jobs for Singaporeans. Now, we do a few things. We facilitate investments. We partner with globally leading enterprises on their transformation efforts and also to boost productivity. And finally, we support corporates doing corporate entrepreneurship and to grow new ventures from Singapore. The EDB, across the manufacturing and tradable services sector, we are responsible for about 35% of Singapore's GDP. And how we really help companies is through a few ways. Firstly, we provide them information on the business landscape in Singapore and the region. We provide them connection to partners, to ecosystem partners, to other industry partners in Singapore, research institutes, other government agencies. And finally, we provide them access to government support as they undertake their business operations in Singapore.
Thank you, Suresh. Thanks for the introduction, and great to have you here.
Thank you.
We will talk about the EDB's workshop as well as the panel progresses. Dario, please.
Thank you very much, Graham. So I'm Dario Conci. I head for Hawksford, our Asian operations. We have several offices all over Asia, and Singapore is our headquarters. What do? We help companies from all over the world to establish a presence in Asia, to expand and to thrive their operations, whether they start in Singapore and then go beyond Singapore to other jurisdictions. Our mission is to handhold corporate clients into the challenges that they will face and make sure that all the back office administration will be taken care of by us. So we start from the incorporation of the vehicles, going down to corporate compliance, tax filings, accounting, payroll, and immigration. But I would say that our added value is about sharing the experience that myself and our colleagues at Hawksford have developed over more than 20 years in Asia.
Thank you again, Dario, and thank you for hosting us. Johannes, please.
Thank you very much, Graham, and everybody for having us today. My name is Johannes. I work for a company called Globalization Partners, or GP. What we do is we provide employer of record services. That is basically we help our clients to employ people in places where they do not have an entity. We do so in 187 countries around the world. Our workshop that we run is all about hiring in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, the other markets here, and doing that in the right way. So whenever the participants decide to dip their feet in the water, put some boots on the ground, and they're ready to hire people. We help them to decide what is the right way of doing so, what is the right format, and how to do so compliantly. Thank you for having me.
That's wonderful, Johannes. Great to have you here. And last but not least, Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Dawson here. Thanks for having us again. I'm the founder of Asia Market Entry. Asia Market Entry, as the name suggests, helps companies enter the Asia market. But what it doesn't say in the name is that it's really a sales agency focused on revenue outcomes. So really what my business does is help run workshops. It helps drive top of the funnel pipeline. It helps build partner and channel ecosystems. And also in some cases provides fractional sales for companies that need sales, a sales force, but don't necessarily have the wherewithal or the business case to have people on the ground yet. Thanks.
Thank you again, Steve. So it's a pretty balanced and diverse panel that we have in terms of the services and the expertise that we can discuss. We have a representative from the government and a greater voice and opinion for how we can grow, not just in Singapore, but to the rest of the region. We have corporate services again from Oxford. So when it comes to compliance and actually setting up in this country and in the region, we have a voice as well. For remote employment, for talent, for rapid market entry, we have both Johannes and Steve as well. So let's get the panel started. This first question is generally to all of you. So we're familiar with how Singapore is a very relevant location to establish a business. Maybe starting with yourself, Dario. In your view, what's Singapore done in recent years to stay competitive?
I think what distinguishes Singapore from all other competing hubs in Asia, I would say in the world, it's by sticking to its own vision and strategy. What I mean by this, I mean that Singapore, since its creation, has acknowledged its own limitations, for example, geographical, has realized what is the strength and developed upon its strength, devised a vision and a strategy. And both are very long term. So what is, in my opinion now, the vision? It's for Singapore to be the preferred hub for high quality, high tech, high added value businesses to call Singapore home in their expansion into Asia. Therefore, Singapore, in my view, doesn't concentrate and put its priority, for example, in challenges like the cost, because we know Singapore is a very expensive jurisdiction, or it doesn't adopt maybe an completely open policy to indiscriminate immigration. But it focuses on making sure that those businesses that Singapore is interested to attract really feel that Singapore is the best place to start and to thrive by creating the ecosystem, talents, investors, potential clients, or contacts that can open up clients in other jurisdictions. So I think this has always been its way, which is not looking at the competition and trying to address what they're doing, but really looking at where am I going and sticking to that road.
Thank you, Dario. And that is an excellent point about Singapore. Hub, right? Being the centralized place where all businesses come to this region. A gateway really even to Asia, but not just to Asia, but to the other way around as well, from the reverse direction. That's something that we've always been sort of famous for, something that we've leveraged pretty well. And it's not only something that the private sector does knowingly, but that the government actively enforces. This next question, I think, would be something I'd like to ask you, Suresh. Are there particular industries or sectors where you see the most opportunity right now?
Yeah, I think for Singapore, what we have tried to do is to constantly refresh our economic strategy in order to meet the needs of the evolving global landscape. And I think the government does this by focusing on areas like innovation, sustainability, technology, and we want to step forward to support the key growth areas. And I'll identify three of them: advanced manufacturing, the green economy, and also AI. So when we look at advanced manufacturing, manufacturing today actually makes up 17% of Singapore's GDP. And our objective is to ensure that it continues to stay around that figure in the years to come. What we have here is a robust end-to-end ecosystem that can support companies as they set up their manufacturing operations. And as Dario mentioned earlier, we really focus on high value add manufacturing because that's where we think it makes sense for companies setting up here. As an example, today we have 6 World Economic Forum lighthouse factories in Singapore, and this include the likes of Infineon, Coca-Cola, Global Foundries, and Micron, which also has its largest production facility outside the US here in Singapore. What this means is that these factories, they integrate digital technologies, data analytics, smart manufacturing processes, and hence they've been recognized by the WEF for this. The second area I'll touch on is green economy, and that for us is really interesting because not only does it represent transformation, but new opportunities. Let me elaborate a little bit. So when we look at transformation, we have the Jurong Island in Singapore, one of the largest petrochemical hubs in the region, and this was established 25 years ago in 1990. Today we have over 100 energy and chemicals companies that have set up there. And a lot of them are going through a transformation today because the global green chemicals sector is emerging. What this means for Jurong Island is Jurong Island also has to evolve with the times and is pivoting. So today we are focusing on areas like new energies, new technologies like carbon capture storage, and also supporting the growth of new industries, like for example, data centers. We recently announced 20 hectares in Jurong Island, which is going to be the largest green data center hub in Singapore. The third area I'll touch on is AI. So when we look at AI, AI is going to be a massive transformational force, not just in Singapore, but I think the world. We do see in Southeast Asia, Singapore having the lion's share of capital investments in AI. About 70% of the region's capital investments in AI come through Singapore. And correspondingly, companies are investing here. So you do have the likes of AWS, which are investing in cloud capabilities in Singapore. And you also have the likes of Microsoft, which are training thousands of SMEs in partnership with the government. So we're trying to build capabilities in order to ensure the local ecosystem can support this growth. And you're seeing this with, I think, the emergence of what we call AI centers of excellence, which are really just dedicated AI teams. Since the start of last year, we have over 50 of them that have set up in Singapore, and we hope to see many more. The thing about AI is that it's not just a vertical, it's also a horizontal. So we are seeing it create new opportunities in areas like biotech, for example, in Industry 4.0, in advanced manufacturing. And this then creates more opportunities for companies that are also looking to grow in these adjacent sectors.
That is plenty. That is a lot that Singapore does and that Singapore attracts. And you know, when we think about all these industries and all of these companies that come in with such a famous pedigree of companies like you mentioned Infineon and so on, coming here seems to be the obvious landing point. I think maybe for the next question, which is what companies should do after they incorporate in Singapore, right? What happens next? Like when we look to going to another region, for example, what are some considerations that we must think about, right? So this is open to anyone on the floor here, right? If we were trying to expand to another country from Singapore, like what must a business keep in mind? Perhaps say from a sales perspective.
I think, you know, after incorporating, I mean, why incorporate? I mean, you incorporate because you want to transact and be able to do that locally. You want to hire locally, and you want to start hitting the ground running locally, either with a team or with an agency. I would also argue there's quite a lot of that you can do before incorporating, but incorporation does actually open up quite a lot of opportunity, especially when it comes to the type of government support that's available. And by the way, some of this is already available before incorporating, but a lot more opens up once you're incorporated that can help fuel that growth. So the EDB has several programs you don't have to incorporate for. The workshop is an example of that. Venture Launchpad is another, and others. But there are other sister government agencies in Singapore that also work hand in hand, be it Enterprise Singapore with things like the MRA grant, which if you have incorporated, and especially if you have a 30% local shareholding, can open up funding to essentially subsidize that expansion to other regions, which is incredibly valuable, as well as other grants for digital transformation locally to help drive that through automation and other such things. And there's other groups such as Startup SG, IMDA. They have various challenges and whatnot, which will be both in Singapore and outside, which companies can essentially take advantage of and essentially help fuel whatever they're trying to do from an international expansion point of view, both in Singapore, but in particular outside. Because Singapore and the EDB is quite honest and transparent that yes, Singapore is a great hub, but actually growth has to happen across the entire region. And so Singapore is a really great place to do that for, and have a great government partner to help support that expansion. But really, if there's one comment and takeaway I'd say from that question is look into that grant ecosystem, because that's really how you can fuel that. And then how you dictate which country first, ultimately that's going to be dependent on each and every company that's doing it. But essentially the programs that are available are agnostic enough that it can essentially be there to help anyone, anywhere.
Wow, that's really interesting, Steve. Suresh, let me get this straight. Our government wants you to come here. Our government wants you to set up and land here. But our government, based on what Steve is saying, is willing to look into grants to help you expand to other countries anyway?
Let me put that into context. So I think when we look at companies coming here, we want companies to come here, we want companies to set up here. I think what we ultimately look for is companies that can have a sustainable presence in Singapore. And we acknowledge that many companies come to Singapore obviously because of what they can do here, but also because they want to use Singapore as that launch pad to grow in the region. And there's some examples of this. We call this as part of our Singapore Plus, or SG Plus for short, strategy, where we encourage companies to leverage on what the Singapore business ecosystem has to offer. It's a business-friendly environment. You have great global connectivity from Singapore. You have high-value talent available here and a vibrant ecosystem. Leverage on that and then grow in the proximate region. So under Singapore Plus, we work very closely with our neighboring countries, Malaysia in the north, particularly in the Johor region, and the Batam, Bintan, Karimun region in the south. Johor in the north is accessible via 2 land borders, and the Batam, Bintan, Karimun Island is a 45-minute to 60-minute ferry ride away. And the thinking really is how can businesses leverage on this to get the best of both worlds? So you can have your regional HQ in Singapore, you can have your innovation R&D functions, your control tower in Singapore, and then let's say your operations require much larger facilities to do manufacturing, or let's say more cost sensitive manufacturing, then you can tap on what is a ready, skilled pool of talent available in Johor and the BBK, and also a growing industrial base. So we want to help companies get the best of both worlds, leverage what both sides has to offer in order to grow and to set up successful and sustainable businesses.
Thank you, Suresh. And switching to the subject of talent, when businesses are trying to expand from Singapore, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that they face, particularly in the realm of talent? Maybe Johannes, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think maybe just building on what Suresh has just mentioned, what we see is that the companies that are coming to us to participate in the workshop and they want to deploy talent into the region or tap on the larger talent pool here, they very often need to understand that this region is just incredibly diverse and complex from a cultural point of view, from a market size point of view, from a maturity point of view. And the challenges that our participants very often face are how to address these markets, how to go into these markets, and how to easily hire and employ people in these markets and be successful by doing so. Yes, it is great to establish Singapore as your base and then go out from there, but where do you really go next? What is your business model? What are the products and services that you're bringing forward, and what are the markets that will make your business model be more successful? That warrants a very deep analysis that I'm sure Steve and AME can absolutely help you with. But when it comes to the challenges, and coming back to your question, Graham, from a hiring perspective, it is not quite as simple as just setting up in Singapore and starting to hire in the region. And I'm not making a joke here. This is an actual question that I have received in one of the workshops, where a company has asked me if they could just set up here and then hire people in Thailand and Indonesia and Malaysia. And obviously that is not the case. There are different labor laws in those different countries that you need to be aware of that are actually protecting the workers in those jurisdictions. So you need to be aware what the labor laws are, what the regulations are there that you need to follow, and then you need to adhere by them. And that's, I guess, what we all are here for, to help our clients and navigate that complex environment also from a labor law perspective.
Thanks, Johannes. And, compliance and hiring for other talent in the region is certainly like a big question mark too. But say, for example, if you were trying to sell to a different part of ASEAN, right? What's different from the rest of Southeast Asia as compared to selling in Singapore? Like, what are some things that businesses need to keep in mind before they try to decide how to go to market? Steve?
I mean, there has to be just an honest view of, one, which countries you're going to go after. Two, accept that they're all going to be very, very different. There's multiple languages, there's multiple religions, there's multiple cultures. So you absolutely can't treat it with the same brush. Singapore is just this beautiful melting pot of something that everybody can relate to. But if you start going across cross-border, it becomes very specific to each and every one of those countries. And so you just got to, number one, accept that that's the case and plan accordingly. It might mean having local people. It might mean having local partners to help navigate those challenges, but it's absolutely not the same. That being said, with what's happening in sales these days and what's available through AI and automation with the concept of just using data more intelligently, there's a lot of business development that you can do to all of those regions without physically being there, at least at the top of the funnel, where you're trying to generate brand awareness and interest in order just to open the door to get that first engagement. I do believe that there's ultimately going to be a point where in any given country, Singapore included, you have to have people to go there to be able to close deals.
Yeah.
But I also believe that there's a lot you can do before that to at least establish and validate the market purely through pipeline building, and then start getting serious about hiring once you've got the pipeline to justify that.
No, thanks, Steve. Now, you're touching on something that also is pretty close to my heart. I mean, when I was previously working for a tech company that was trying to sell to the rest of APAC, there was like a sort of, shall we say, a dissonance between their own experience in selling to North America, for example, where, I wouldn't want to call North America and the 50 states homogenous, but it certainly requires a different mindset compared to, shall we say, selling in Singapore for one, and then selling to ASEAN as well. There's like two ways how companies go about doing this, right? Like, one is to try and go in straight, right? But when you have such a diverse ecosystem as ASEAN, Steve, I wonder whether partnerships are actually the way to go to try to go to market. Like, what do you feel about that comment actually on partnerships as a way to leverage into the rest of the region?
Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about partnerships, but partnerships is a big word, and I think that often it's almost mislabeled. I mean, when I look at partnerships from a go-to-market sales motion, I'm looking at resellers, I'm looking at distribution, or anyone that can represent my product or my customers' products. So for me, that's my definition of partner. Other organizations would have a different definition. But no, I think they're absolutely essential, because unless you've got very deep pockets and want to do that directly, you're going to need a lot of people. And don't even get me started once we start talking about the sales teams you would need for places like China or India, which are just vast in their own right. So partners just give a very scalable fast track to being able to sell in all of these regions, because they've got the relationships. They've probably been selling into those customer bases for many, many years or decades. They've got existing customers that they can take new products to, and they can navigate all of those idiosyncrasies around, the culture and the relationships, which, of course, you have to rely on for sales. And so, I still think you need people to support the partners, and those people need to be local. But I think partners are very well placed to be able to support those markets and the sales motion there, so long as you support them right. And so that's, the real takeaway from that comment is be ready to partner. Be ready to talk about not just what margin you're going to give away, but how you're going to help them grow their business. How are you really going to support them and enable them to do better? Because you'd be surprised, these partners, actually, they just want to grow their business. And your product is somewhat secondary. So being able to articulate that and being able to just make that crystal clear to partners in any region, Singapore included, is essential. It can't be just about your product. It has to be about how you're going to help a third party grow by co-selling with you.
If I may jump in, I would like to say that in our experience, this is the perfect combination, what Steve just mentioned. So it's important that you have your presence, and it's important you have a partner. Why I say this? Because in over 20 years, I've seen so many investors coming to Asia, and because they have a fantastic brand or fantastic product, they just expect that the product would sell itself, they can fly in, fly out, and the job will be done. And that's not the case. You might find a distributor, a partner, franchisee, whatever, but if you're not there to support, to make sure that the partner is going or bringing your product in the direction you want or exploiting the full potential, you need to be present. And this is something that in time companies understood. So I would say that really the direct commitment of, for example, establishing in Singapore, but then with the people, and usually you should send the best people to Asia, can support, control, and direct the partners, that is the best combination.
Well said, Dario. I mean, local partnerships, right, and having like a clarity for how you're going to go to market and where you're going to expand and how you're going to expand sounds great. In principle, of course, this is something I'm sure every business wants. But if we think about how different the regulatory environment is for all these different countries, right? I mean, Singapore does a great job in terms of rankings for ease of business because we have a certain sort of almost painfully obvious transparency with how we want to go about asking companies to set up and land here, which is, I think, one of the great things and advantages of being in Singapore. But say, for example, if one were to expand to the rest of Southeast Asia, right, Dario, how do you manage that balance between compliance and the need to be agile, whether that's from a sales perspective or just the general vision that a company might have when they want to look beyond this shore?
I think in a way, Singapore and the success of the infrastructure that it has created, in a way, spoils investors because they come here and they expect the rest of Asia to be as easy, as transparent, as predictable. But the reality is that Singapore is, among other things, so successful because of this and ahead of many other jurisdictions. Because most of Southeast Asian jurisdictions have, for example, legal frameworks that are a mix of civil law, common law, colonial law. So these are environments very different, where bureaucracy is quite heavy, so there is a lot of red tape. And this means that you really need to be ready to enter in those markets with direct operations. You need to learn, you need to understand, and you need to be resourced. So I think Singapore really helps you because you can do business in the region from Singapore. There will be a point that you will need to establish local operations, for example, in Indonesia or in Vietnam, because that's the nature of business. But being in Singapore will allow you and will give you the time to understand when you're ready to go into those markets. Because if you are not prepared, if you don't understand how many of the Southeast Asian jurisdictions, or India, or also China, work, it's very easy to get hurt. Capital commitments, timing of incorporation, labor laws, tax laws are all very complicated, unlike in Singapore. So careful preparation is very important.
Indeed, indeed. Go ahead.
Maybe I can just add something here from a hiring perspective, and apologies for bringing the subject to that back all the time. But we just recently, again, had a workshop participant that had set up in Singapore and was looking into hiring in different countries around Singapore in the region here. And just to maybe give some color to the complexities in labor law that Dario was talking about just now is you need to understand that, say, if you're hiring somebody in the Philippines, you're not paying them on a monthly basis, you pay them 2 times per month. If you are hiring somebody in Indonesia, you have to pay them a 13th month, which is a Hari Raya bonus. If you're hiring somebody in China, they need to wet ink sign the labor contract, because if they do not do that, then the contract may be called void after that. So it's those things that as a company coming into this part of the world, you need to understand and you need to be aware of. And a lot of the time and effort and also the enthusiasm and the motivation that you have coming into this region might, just be blocked by those things. So again, this is, I guess, where we are here, and we are as workshop partners there to support the participants and make their lives a little bit easier, and help them with all of the experience that Dario, you mentioned 2 decades. I think we're here for about a decade. Obviously, EDB, AME, you guys also amassed a lot of experience, and that's something where I guess my general advice would be to tap on that help and be open to it and be ready for it, because that's something that can really be your gateway into the region.
Honestly, like the picture that all 3 of you painted for what it means to sell or to find talent and employ that talent compliantly, or to expand and set up in the rest of this region is, I'm just thinking out loud that it might be almost a little intimidating for someone tuning in to think about going to the rest of the region, and even if we're starting from Singapore, right? But Suresh, we do have a pretty famous program that's been spoken about a few times on this show, the workshop. And obviously the workshop is designed to make some of that answering of those questions and how to move forward a bit easier. Could you maybe describe a little bit more about what the workshop does under the EDB to help companies who are looking to expand from Singapore to the rest of the region?
Yep. Thanks, Graham. And I think what my fellow panelists have spoken is a great segue to introducing the workshop, because entering this region or entering a new market, let alone a new region, can be quite a daunting task. There are various complexities, regulatory complexities, talent issues that you need to overcome, finding the right partners to work with. And what we at the EDB wanted to do is, how can we help companies make this process a little easier? And that's where the workshop comes in. We have put together a network of trusted partners, including the 3 partners seated here, who can support businesses, provide them advisory in areas such as incorporation, regulatory compliance, tax planning, recruitment, and financial services as well. The thinking really is sign up for the workshop, receive a 1-hour complimentary session with one of our workshop service providers, or multiple workshop service providers if they choose.
To be clear, including the folks here?
Yes, including the folks here. And get the insights that you need to help you plan ahead. Because oftentimes, when you say, okay, I'm ready to go, what next? You do need that conversation with a partner who knows what they're doing to advise you, okay, you are here, this is what you need to do next in this area. So what we really want to do is, how can we lower the barriers or overcome some of these barriers for companies that are looking to set up in Singapore and the region. I think my panelists have been very kind in speaking of Singapore, and we do try to make Singapore a place where you can do business easily, efficiently, but that doesn't mean that it's any less daunting for someone not familiar with Singapore coming in. What's my first step? So be it the Singapore or the broader region, the workshop is there as a tool or a platform to support you in order to take the next step.
Thank you, Suresh. That's wonderful. And maybe I can invite any one of you to maybe give a little bit of an example of like how it's been when you were facilitating the workshop for one of these hopeful companies who are looking to come to Singapore and or Southeast Asia. Anyone?
I don't mind taking that one. I mean, first of all, we're proud to be on it as a partner, but also I have to say we really enjoy them because we get to meet all of these amazing companies from all over the world. It's industry agnostic. And we get the fun workshop, right? Because our workshop is about how to grow revenue in Asia, and everybody wants to know how to do that. But when we go into the workshop itself, And because I think the word workshop can sometimes be misused, right? And I want to be clear to everyone that's listening in. This is an actual workshop where you actually have to do some work. It's not a presentation, or otherwise we call it the presentation. And so it's more of a discovery, it's design thinking, it's almost like go-to-market therapy, where we understand what's working, what's holding you back. It's a strictly no sales environment, by the way. And then after the workshop, after we understand what you're trying to achieve, after that we come up with a deliverable, and they're the solutions. And this is documentation, 10, 12-page documents, 4,000 words, with essentially a go-to-market brief, and it's all pro bono, right? So we enjoy it. It's genuinely helpful. The idea is to define a North Star about why you're doing it in the first place, and then reverse engineer that to create the steps to get to that North Star. And if we can identify what's holding you back, then, sure, we can combine, all come up with the recommendations to be able to solve those gaps across sales, across talent, across company formation, etc.
Thank you, Steve. Dario, if we're looking about people, say, coming through the workshop to talk about going to the rest of ASEAN, what are some other key considerations that one must think of when looking to set up elsewhere across multiple countries? Or say, for example, if you were to try and bring someone to Singapore, right? Let's say you've come from, say, Europe or North America, and you've decided, because of the wonderful regime set up by a government to incorporate in Singapore, that you start here first, but then maybe you need some pioneers or trailblazers. Bring them down from HQ. Yes, we will hire locally. We will go to the rest of the region, but we want some of the folks from back home to come and get the ball rolling. Like, what are your thoughts on that subject?
Well, I guess from our point of view, the beauty of the workshop is, among other things, is that it addresses a very important part, which is the educational piece. So there are 2-3 parts. There is the educational bit. There is a expectation management, which I think is very important. So one is explaining what it means to come and invest here from all point of views. Our part is the legal, corporate, accounting, tax, and so on and so forth. But you will educate them on that. You will understand if they are ready for the task, because as Steve was mentioning, it is interactive. So we also ask questions. So for example, what is the expected workforce? Who are you planning to send someone, as you mentioned? And for example, if we understand that the investor just thinks to set up an empty box, we'll tell them it doesn't really work, it's not effective. What my mentor taught me 20 years ago was to send to Asia your best people. So, say, foreign business from Europe coming to Asia, you don't just believe that your product will do the job. You have to think that that is the most challenging market with the biggest potential in the world, and therefore, you should take out of your organization the person that will hurt the most to take it out and to put it into Asia. That's how you should address your investment into Asia, because it has the highest potential. But it's also a very evolved and sophisticated market. So Singaporean, ASEAN, Chinese buyers, they now expect not only the best product, they expect the best service. They expect it in the same time zone, after sales and so on and so forth. So for us it's important, the workshop, because we can understand where the client is at that point in time and try to put them in the right direction. On the immigration side, as I said, it's connected. It's in Singapore specifically, there is a very transparent framework. As I mentioned, Singapore is not open to indiscriminate immigration. But if you meet certain qualifying criteria, which in a nutshell means that you have to bring knowledge, capabilities that can then be shared with the local population, then it's definitely something that Singapore is interested in. Going to the other countries, Southeast Asia, as I mentioned, it is quite complicated, and it requires more than other places to set up real on-the-ground operations. To rent offices, you have to wait for a long time, to put high capital and so on and so forth. And immigration laws are also connected to all these aspects.
Thank you, Dario. Yes, go ahead, Suresh.
Graham, if I can just add to that. I mean, when we look at talent in Singapore, I think make no mistake about it, I think Singapore and the EDB, we are committed to helping companies establish their A teams here. What that means is enabling them to bring in the best talent who can make, as Dario mentioned, the greatest difference for their business from here. We have introduced a few work passes over the past few years in order to kind of facilitate this, be it individuals, top quality talent and individuals who have a diversity of either experiences or capabilities. We have something called the One Pass that can do this. Or even for tech companies or tech workers, we have programs to help bring them in so that they can help build their tech products here in Singapore. We complement this with what we are trying to make a more transparent and clear employment pass program. So now it's a point system that is accessible via the Manpower Ministry website. And the thinking really is, how can we attract great global talent, come to Singapore, make this home, complement that with the local workforce and the talent that you do find in the universities and research institutes here, and together build a complete team that is digitally savvy, that is technically capable, and that can help you grow in Singapore and also in the region as well.
Thank you, Suresh.
Maybe I can add one point to that, and to both of you actually, because speaking about the talent and how to employ them, and also the educational part of the workshop. We're not running our workshop as structured and stringent as Steve and AME does. I'm very well aware of that. For us, it's more of a conversational exploration with the participant, where we try to understand what their plans are and what their hiring plans are and how we can support them do that. And then it is also an educational journey, to Dario's point, which is where we kind of lay out the different options of how to employ people here in Singapore, but also in the region. So whether that is through incorporation and directly hiring them, whether that is through a contracting model, or it is through a joint venture, a partnership, or maybe an EOR model that we are offering, where interestingly, and that's to the educational aspect, many clients or participants don't even know that they can hire people even though they don't have an entity in a particular country. They can hire through an employer of record like ourselves and just do that. So that is one of the things that I guess we provide, and you guys are also talking about enabling those workshop participants. And this is also based on the massive partner network that we have built over the years, whether they are partners in business services, in market entry, the EDB, or in the recruiting space, whether that is in the mobility space, and we can then connect those workshop participants with the right people to kind of further on their journey. So that's, for me, the most important point. It's educational and connecting and enabling, in a sense.
Thank you, Johannes. And of course, that matters a lot. So it isn't just doing the work in the workshop to get answers for what you need. It's also third-party connections, again, to help you get to where you want to be.
You can't solve all the problems in 1 hour in the workshop, right? You probably work together, all the partners, so that they have a good journey and can successfully move into the future and make that vision become a reality.
Yeah, I mean, Suresh, in a moment I'm going to ask you a bit about like case studies or success stories, if you will, for how companies have been able to utilize either the workshop and or the EDB to succeed in Singapore and the rest of the region. But I want to come back to you, Johannes, on this point that you mentioned, EOR. Of course, I know what EOR is because I have some context of what it means in the region. But earlier when Dario was talking about the maturity and sort of like where the customer is at in terms of their commit to go to another part of this region, I mean, there's varying levels of maturity, right? I think you will agree there will be companies where they want to go all in. They will set up a plant. They will set up a factory in, say, Yogyakarta and so on, right? And I think there's no substitute to go and speak to someone who can do the hard yards for compliance and advice. But what is your opinion vis-a-vis with this EOR thing on the subject of companies who are a little bit less mature, not so sure yet about whether to go in, pull the trigger and go to the deep end, or to do something a bit, shall we say, on the shallow side of the pool first?
They might not even be less mature. It's just a different business setup, I would say. That some of the companies that are talking to us and they're setting up in Singapore, They're maybe just interested in testing the waters in the different markets in the region. And they want to do so in a effective and flexible way, right? So maybe the most effective way is not to go in and incorporate in every single country in Southeast Asia, because it can take some time and some effort to do so, and maybe even some financial investment. So the EUR thing, as you describe it, is pretty much that they can put somebody on the ground in a country or employ somebody locally without having an entity in that country. What is the benefit of that? The EUR provider, which is a company like Globalization Partners, is then the employer of record, so the original employer of that person, but kind of outsources the work back to the company that employs those services. But what we do is we make sure that the employee is onboarded correctly, the contract is right, we are paying them adequately, give them the right benefits, and make sure that the statutory payments and such are being made. But all of the work is going back to the actual employer, to the participant of the workshop. That's a very flexible concept, and I do like talking about it because I understand that many people are just not aware of it, and we just want to raise the awareness for that, because what you could do is you could start going into Singapore, and then you could dip your feet into several markets with an employer of record concept, test it out, send some marketeers over there, or send some other people, or just hire some talent that is scarce in your organization. Do that flexibly and then maybe you focus on one market, you incorporate there, and the other one, you might close down one, and one you continue running in EUR concept. So it's very, very flexible in a sense to do so, and that's something that we talk to the participants about.
Thanks a lot, Johannes. Suresh, I said I was going to come back to you as well. I think just bearing in mind that our audience, at least from the sign-up list, includes companies from Europe, companies from North America, South America, all over the world really, right? We've had a lot of discussion about the greater interaction between Singapore and the rest of the region. I asked about, say, case studies or examples. Are there any examples that you can highlight where the EDB has actively supported companies' market entry into Singapore, at least from the beginning?
Yep. I think when we look at the EDB supporting companies setting up in Singapore, of course, and helping them with the regional strategy, I think it goes back to why Singapore. I think that's the first question that companies need to answer. A lot has been spoken about, how do you go about doing what you do in the region? But then I would say the starting point is, what does Singapore have to offer? Typically, I think we've spoken quite a bit about talent. We've spoken quite a bit about the business environment. But it's also things like IP protection, the rule of law. These are key enablers for businesses to decide, okay, I'm going to set this up here. And then the next part of that equation is, okay, then what corollary functions do I have in Singapore because of this? And I can point out an example. One example is for Dyson, for example, a well-known global consumer electronics tech company. So they have their HQ in Singapore. They have their global corporate engineering services and also their advanced robotics team that is based here. And this enables them to design products, even produce some products, especially their most IP-sensitive parts of their equipment here. And then also develop a regional sales strategy, which they then execute across Asia and across the globe. So from a production manufacturing perspective, I think they got a much wider footprint than just Singapore. But then thinking through what is Singapore's value proposition, and then what can I do here versus what can I do outside of Singapore? And then that comes up with a complete strategy.
Thank you, Suresh. It does seem unusually pragmatic for a government agency to be pretty real about the idea of a Singapore plus one or hub and spoke strategy, but it is something that it sounds like a lot of companies have been able to leverage well.
Yes, and I would say we have to be practical. I mean, Singapore is, 735 square kilometers, population of 6 million people. So we know what we bring to the table, and we also know where our constraints are. Our constraints largely are around land, labor, and increasingly carbon as well. And those are the areas then I think we need to work closely with partners in the region to execute. I'll give you another example. The South Korean company SPC Group, They are the owners of a very famous global bakery, Paris Baguette. So they have their regional HQ in Singapore, their central kitchen innovation center in Singapore. And they have established their first halal certified factory across the border in Johor. So this model does work for many companies when they start thinking through what do I need in Singapore, what added advantages would I have by setting up outside of Singapore. And a halal factory for a F&B company is great because then it allows them to tap into new global markets beyond just in Southeast Asia, but also the Middle East as well.
That's amazing.
I might just add actually on that, you asked about the case studies as well. And I think another important point around the workshop is that it's available to all, right? It's not just for big companies, right? And that's often a misconception when dealing with government. You have to be a large company to get help. Not true. The workshop is really a vehicle to help all. And the workshop, in terms of participants, I think just last week, another case study was brought out. Muse was on there, a sustainability company. Novacert was another one from the US. Previously, a company there was Koval Technologies, chemical company, including, by the way, Singapore-based companies. This isn't just for international companies coming over here. This workshop program is also available for Singaporean companies just as much as it is for international, because it's still just expansion and growth, whether it's Singaporean or an international firm, is still what good looks like.
Yeah.
So plenty of testimonials. I think there's been about 50 public testimonials now, roughly.
Wow.
But there's a couple online on the EDB website which can speak to them in detail.
Yeah, the workshop's been running like for how long?
It was established about just over 2 years ago now. And then we continue to want to evolve the program to make it more robust, and also I think really leverage on the strengths that our partners can bring in terms of what they see, because I think they also are very close to the companies. All three of them have mentioned, they speak to the companies on a daily basis. So based on what they see, I think they'll also be able to advise, I see this need in the market. Let's try tweaking it a bit in order to support these needs that we see for the companies.
Thank you, Suresh. Yeah, and we're going to go and answer some of the questions that have come in. But just a point on like this topic you brought up about, it's not just for large companies. I think one other thing that makes Singapore quite unusual is that we are, by leaving aside things like geopolitics and all of that, we are a pretty neutral jurisdiction. I think if you are dialing in from, countries that come from certain blocs or certain multinational alliances, etc. It's kind of easy for us to like briefly forget that there is a lot of division now without going too much into the details. And yet, on the subject of like the sort of inclusivity that Singapore has, all kinds of companies from all kinds of countries of various sizes, that is something that I think makes this place also additionally attractive if I were to just chime into my own 2 cents. So now switching over to questions. Oh, this is a good one. So we got a question that says, and this is open to anyone on the floor here, what is your number 1 tip that you would give to a business looking to expand to Singapore and or ASEAN for the first time? That's like a big one, but I suppose you can just pick the one.
I'll start.
Yeah.
Number 1 tip, prioritize. Don't try to do everything to begin with. Decide what you want to do and pick one thing. And do that. And 2, make sure you've got company support to do it. It can't be an individual renegade going solo to Singapore because it's a good idea. Everyone's going to need their whole organisation behind them at some point. So it's best to get that okay up front. It's a wealth of opportunity, but what you don't want to do is come here without that backing, because it could easily fail quite quickly if you start surprising people.
Thank you. And we got another one, which is, what do you think that a startup in the art world would be able to develop in Singapore? We've been talking about some pretty hard very hard sort of industries that we were discussing, whether it's advanced manufacturing or AI. But if you were a startup in the art world, right, what can you leverage on in Singapore to develop? Does anyone have an idea on this?
I don't really have an idea, but what I can share is that I think Singapore has understood that to be attractive, among other things, has to be also a vibrant society with also a cultural aspect into it. So no real successful metropolis or hub is successful if the people that live there are not wholesome and happy with the life they're living, and that includes also the art element and cultural element. So I've been in Singapore for so many years, since 2012, and I've seen Singapore dedicating more and more investments into this aspect of life.
Yeah, certainly that's very true as well. Steve, it sounds like you want to say something.
Just specific to that question,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure how many of us are experts in this case, but that's actually one of the use cases around the workshop, to diagnose exactly that, to listen. What does the art company want to do, right? And that's literally the objective of the workshop, to uncover all of that, to unpack it.
Yeah.
What is it? What do you actually want to do?
Yeah.
Is it incorporate? Is it to sell? Is it to, find budding artists? It could be anything, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's literally just a great use case of why the workshop exists, to get clarity on a question like that, to then subsequently provide solutions and recommendations, and probably some introductions along the way.
Yeah. I think that's pretty fair, Steve. I don't think any of us here can pretend to be art industry experts to be able to concretely answer this, but at least speaking from my own experience with this subject, I think broadly speaking there are three things that have happened quite well in terms of the development of the art industry. The first is to understand that, it depends on what kind of art, right? So there is actually a pretty large industry in Singapore of private art collectors, all right? So the likes of curators and art galleries, auction houses, they all have a base here. And there are actually some unusual, extensive private collections of very, very, very famous artworks that exist in this country. And what that also means is that there is a small but thriving industry of collectors and all of the industry ecosystem players around it that can support that. It isn't only just about the fact that we have a lot of collectors and art slowly choosing this place because of all of the benefits and the security that we provide. It is also the fact that the government invests way more heavily into the art industry, as to say, for example, when I was a kid, there is a very cognizant recognition that the art industry is something that isn't just here to stay, but it's something that we actively want to encourage. Dario talked about the idea of a wholesome citizenry. That's something that I know that the government wants very well. And I'm speaking also from first-hand experience, because I have a brother who was a beneficiary of a wonderful art education. The name of this school is called the School of the Arts, and that is found in one of our city centers in Singapore. And he went on to the University of Berkeley, which is one of the best schools ever, the Berkeley College of Music, in Boston. We actively invest not just in the industry, but also in the talent, again, on the idea of Singapore plus one hub and spoke and all of that. We have another question that's just come in, which is, as a tech or AI startup, something that of course I am sure a lot of people are thinking about, as a tech or AI startup wanting to access the Southeast Asian market via Singapore, what practical support is available to get up and running quickly? I feel all of you can answer this. Yeah. Maybe Suresh?
Sure. I think as a tech company coming to Southeast Asia, the opportunity is massive. Temasek, Google, and Bain, they do this annual economy report where they talk about the digital opportunity in Southeast Asia. And I think the latest update, which came out just maybe about a month ago, said that the region will see the gross merchandise value exceed over $300 billion by 2025. So the opportunity is massive, and this is going to cut across your e-commerce, online ride-hailing, digital financial services, and then many, many more. How do you get started? Well, it depends what you want to do. Is your first step you want to incorporate in Singapore because you want to sell into the region? In which case, then I'll point you to AME who'll be able to advise you. It's your first step that, you want to set up a base here because you want to access funding. Because over, the last decade or so, we have seen more private wealth come to Singapore. We have seen a growth in the number of family offices that have set up here, and this has helped to really catalyze the funding ecosystem here. And what, as government, we want to do is, how do you pull together this capital, not just to have it idle, sitting in banks, but how can it be deployed into the local ecosystem to support companies as they grow? And hence then there are various initiatives either run by IMDA, Enterprise Singapore, to help startups access funding, connect with partners, and then grow regionally. Yeah.
Thank you, Suresh. And Johannes, I'm going to follow a view on the subject of talent, because technology is also something that matters a lot, and also tech talent in particular. I talked, and Steve began with the point of how the workshop is for all kinds of companies. Similarly, in Singapore, you find all kinds of tech companies as well. That's for sure. We have both. I mean, if you didn't already know this, to you in the audience, we have both Facebook/Meta and TikTok/ByteDance in Singapore, for starters, right? We have so much tech talent in Singapore. And I venture to say that you can probably access some of the best talent in the region from Singapore on the subject of AI vis-a-vis technology generally. Speaking, of course, from personal experience, hiring both in Singapore and outside. But Johannes, beyond Singapore, like if say someone were to try and hire, say, tech talent abroad, you brought up some very unusual, interesting laws in some of the other countries when it comes to hiring talent, right? Like, what is your own view on, say, tech talent in the region generally?
Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious that there's a very fierce war for talent across the world, in particular in the tech and AI industry, right? And there are also a lot of restrictions that are being put on organizations when it comes to bringing the work back home and hiring talent. Say the H-1B visa regulations in the US that have changed recently with a $100,000 kind of like fee that is being put on organizations to bring in people into the US. So maybe the answer to that is not to bring the people to where the work is, but bring the work to where the people are. And that means tapping onto those markets here in the region, Singapore being one of them for sure, but there's also a lot of tech talent in the region. And I'm not going to name any particular countries because there's definitely talent across all of them where companies can go out and they can, back to Suresh's point from just now, not only for the purpose of getting funding or starting to sell their services, but really to set up shop in those countries just for the sole purpose of hiring the right talent. That could be one of the reasons why you're going into Singapore and why you're going into the region. And then, flexibly looking around what are the models and how you can bring that talent on board and have them work for you. So yes, Southeast Asia definitely can be the workbench for other parts of the world. And it happens every day. We get a lot of requests in that regard, and we're happy to help.
Thank you so much, Johannes. Yes, go ahead.
Please.
Sorry, Graham, I realized the question said what practical support. And when you're looking at practical support, one initiative that I can cite is the Tech at SG program that is jointly run by the EDB and our sister agency, Enterprise Singapore. And this really provides employment passes for companies in the tech industry to bring in their top talent to Singapore to get them up and running. We understand that if you're coming here fresh, new, it's unlikely you say, I'm going to land, I'm going to hire 10 people straight away. You're going to want to bring in your core team, 3, 4, 5 people. And this scheme, which is accessible via the EDB website, will allow you to then access employment passes in Singapore to get you up and running.
So we have expedited ways of getting a company to get set up here quickly for immigration as well. We also want to just double click onto the point of like the right brain type industries again. You mentioned a few types of industries as well. We have a question that's come in from the audience about the energy sector. That is a subject that I admittedly know not so much about, but we have a question here which is, would you consider opportunities in nuclear energy, fusion energy startup development, or other deep tech startups in Singapore? You did talk more broadly about deep tech, I think,
Yep.
but this is quite specific. I feel like I have to go back and ask you this question again now, Suresh, but what is your opinion on these very specific industries as far as energy is concerned?
Yeah, I think from the perspective of the Singapore government, we're definitely keen to explore all options. We have set out a very clear net zero target. And once we set the target in a very typical Singapore government fashion, we mobilized the entire government in order to move towards to reach it. And the fact of the matter is we can't hit net zero unless our industries hit net zero. So we are exploring all pathways, including nuclear energy as something that's come up recently. I think previously it was seen as a much more taboo topic in the region. But I think there have been advances in the technology over the last 3-4 years that make a lot of us sit up and say, hey, maybe we need to take a closer look at it. But we want to augment that with other technologies. For example, we're looking at hydrogen, ammonia. We're also working very closely with countries in the region in order to import renewable electricity to Singapore to ensure that our entire grid becomes green. So it is a huge area of opportunity, and it goes back to what I was saying, because it ties in very closely with the transformation that we want to see happening in Jurong Island as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Suresh. All right. It looks like we're actually out of questions and we are slightly over time. So I think what we will do is I will wrap up now. And first thing I will do is I will thank you in the audience. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar, and we hope you've been able to take away some information here that can be useful, but also to understand that even if we weren't able to answer all of your questions or to give you the expertise that you wanted, I think particularly for the art industry question, that you can at least have an avenue through the workshop, which is a connector program where our government agency, the Singapore EDB, Economic Development Board, will link you up with experts, including those on the panel here, whether from corporate services, whether from remote employment, or from how to go to market and design your sales and or marketing/partnership strategy. And of course, the government itself will provide information for you on the various grants, initiatives, programs, and ways to get support from our government or get support for more connections even beyond the panelists here. Thank you so much for tuning in, and please remember to subscribe to the workshop.